become a theater of military action. An hour before strikes on Iran began, Israel carried out a wave of strikes in southern Lebanon, and they did the same on Thursday night. There has been an escalation in recent days. There is concern that Lebanon could be a possible front in this ongoing confrontation, and there's also a concern about what Hezbollah will do. We were expecting to hear from Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Asim at 1300 GMT. There is an event that was planned before the attacks happened. He was expected to speak. Now, the Hezbollah office releasing a statement saying that event has now been postponed, which really clearly indicates that Hezbollah does not want to say what it intends to do, if it intends to do anything, if it intends to get involved in this military confrontation. This is something that has been on everyone's minds. Lebanon's top political leadership saying repeatedly over recent days that they don't want anyone, of course this was directed towards Hezbollah, to drag the country into, quote, a new adventure. A few weeks ago there was an event in Hezbollah organized in solidarity with Iran. We heard Hezbollah Secretary General say, how we would act depends on the details of the battle. The way the battle evolves will determine our action. A few days ago, an anonymous Hezbollah official was quoted as saying that the red line for the group would be an attack on the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. So it's still not clear what Hezbollah will do, but it's very important to point out that Hezbollah is in a very difficult position because it has been severely weakened, and even if it is able to launch missiles at Israel, it will trigger a harsh Israeli response, like target, for example, Beirut's southern suburbs, where hundreds of thousands of Hezbollah supporters live.
Zena, thank you for bringing us the reaction there from Lebanon. Zena Khodr in Beirut. Now, Bahrain has confirmed there have been attacks inside its territory. This is a moment a missile hit the U.S.'s Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain's capital, Manama. Bahrain's National Communications Center has confirmed other attacks targeting sites and facilities within its borders and has condemned those attacks. Let's bring in Rory Challens in Amman, Jordan, for more on what's been happening in the region and the reaction, Rory.
Yeah, well, certainly for people here in Amman, in the capital of Jordan, it was a pretty noisy morning with the sounds of jet fighters you could hear quite clearly up in the sky, and then repeated booms, presumably of air defense or similar things reverberating around the skyline. We have heard from the Jordanian military that 2 ballistic missiles were intercepted and successfully neutralized by the Jordanian air defense systems. And indeed, there has been footage that emerged of some flaming debris that apparently landed on a house or near a house in the Marj al-Hammam area of the capital, but no injuries have been reported. Now, Jordan, like many parts of this region, many countries in this region, hosts US military forces. Now, the Jordanians have a big airbase, Muwafaq Salti Air Base, which is about 100 kilometers east of the capital. That has lots and lots of US planes, or certainly did very recently. 60 to 70 combat aircraft were documented there. There were Chinese satellite pictures that showed very clearly where they were on the air apron and on the strips of that airbase. The Iranians put out an AI video showing that this airbase was going to be targeted in the event of any attack by the United States or by Israel on Iran. And this has been part of Iran's wider pressure campaign against countries like Jordan, like UAE, like Saudi Arabia, etc., to basically tell them, if you are hosting US military capabilities, regardless of whether you are letting those military capabilities be used in any attack on Iran, it doesn't matter to Iran. Iran will still see those as legitimate targets and will strike back. Now, I have to say, for the moment, Jordan seems to have got away relatively unscathed, but, this is very early on in this conflict, and things are certainly able to escalate. Other countries in the region, we've been seeing attacks in Bahrain and UAE, and Saudi Arabia and Iraq as well are not quite have not escaped as quite as unscathed as Jordan has at the moment. But I think we have heard about 40 minutes ago the all-clear air raid siren going out, suggesting that the danger has passed for the moment. But we understand that there could be fresh barrages on the way at any moment.
Rory Challens, live for us in Amman, Jordan. Rory, thank you. It's just coming up to 11 o'clock GMT. I'm Riley Carlson, and you're watching our continuing coverage of the U.S. and Israel's attacks on Iran. Iran has retaliated by launching a wave of missiles at Israel and at U.S. assets across the region. The joint U.S.-Israel attack began in the capital of Tehran, but it has spread across the country in what the United States has called Operation Epic Fury. The Israeli military says it has struck dozens of military targets in Iran and that strikes will continue as required. Iran has closed its airspace and cut mobile phone services. It has also vowed that its response to the attack will be, quote, crushing. This is happening just days after representatives from Tehran and from Washington held indirect negotiations in Geneva. Video shows a low-flying fighter jet in the skies over the Iranian capital. Iranians have been hearing the sounds of jets and explosions throughout Saturday morning. Now, aside from Tehran, there have been attacks in several other cities. That includes the holy city of Qom, Karaj near the capital, Isfahan in central Iran, Tabriz in the northwest, and Kermanshah, Urumqi and Ilam, both on the west border towards Iraq. Shiraz in the south was also hit, and so was a base near Damavand as well. And 5 students have been killed at a girls' school in the south in the Minab County. Northern Israel has been shaken by explosions as the military there intercepts incoming Iranian missiles. Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard says its first wave of retaliation against Israel is underway. Israel has declared a state of emergency. It has also closed its airspace, and it has warned citizens to avoid airports and to stay near emergency shelters. Iran has also launched a series of strikes across the Middle East. The Revolutionary Guard says all U.S. bases, resources, and interests in the region are, quote, legitimate targets. What you were hearing there was the moment a missile hit the center for the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain's capital, Manama. Bahrain's National Communications Center has confirmed attacks targeting sites and facilities within its territory. It says the attacks are a flagrant violation of Bahrain's sovereignty and its security. And at least one person has been killed in Abu Dhabi. The United Arab Emirates has announced the partial and temporary closure of its airspace. These are some of the latest images that appear to show missiles being intercepted in its skies. And there have also been reports of interceptions in Dubai, also in the UAE. Explosions have been heard in Kuwait. Jordan says it has intercepted missiles targeting the country. Saudi Arabia has also been targeted. Qatar's defense ministry says it has responded to missile attacks. These pictures here that you're seeing are from right here in the Qatari capital, Doha. Qatar has also announced the closure of its airspace following the attack on Iran by the U.S. and Israel. Multiple mobile alerts have been sent out. All residents have been urged to take shelter. We have correspondents in Washington, D.C., Doha, and Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. But first, let's go to Mohammed Val, who is in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Mohammed, there have been widespread targets in Tehran today. What can you tell us about the locations and the cities that have been targeted?
Yes, Malin, the most important site in Tehran this morning was the Pastor province. That's where many government institutions are located. That has been target for several attacks this morning. There have been repeated attacks on the capital, Tehran, but we couldn't define the locations of some of those attacks, particularly the ones that happened during the second batch, which is about an hour and a half ago. there is not enough information from the Iranian authorities, even though reactions have been now have started to emerge from the Iranian government. We have the foreign ministry calling on the international community to intervene. We have also the foreign minister talking to his Iraqi counterpart and reassuring him and reiterating again that Iran will defend itself more than ever before and more strongly than ever before. And there have been statements after statements from different government institutions promising a kind of response, a kind of lesson to the Israelis and Americans that they have never seen before from the Iranian authorities and the Iranian army. Iran this time around is sure that this is a sustained campaign and that is probably having the target of regime change. So it is an existential war for them, an existential war for the Iranian government and also the Iranian people. Across the country, there have been strikes in several cities. Some of them you have mentioned, and also we have casualties among civilians in Minab, that's in Hormuzgan. There has been an attack on a school for girls. The preliminary report talks about 5 students killed, but now we have reports from several sources talking about probably more than 30 people killed, and the details are still to emerge. So we are in the middle of a war, and the Iranians have no doubt that this is different than anything that the country has seen before, and also the reaction will be different from anything that the world has seen before. They are calling for calm, they are calling for peace. They have been negotiating with the Americans, and they say this is an act of aggression and a repetition of the same scenario that happened in June last year when the two sides were negotiating, and suddenly the Americans and the Israelis have attacked. So this time around, Iran is not going to show any kind of weakness, and it is not going to be cosmetic strikes anywhere in the region. They have said that they have only good intentions towards their neighbors, but they have the legitimate right as a country under the United Nations Charter to defend themselves and to strike back at any location from which an act of aggression came against the Iranian territories. So we are following up this, and also in terms of the people, the Iranian government has issued statements reassuring people that the situation is under control. This is not like the previous attack when many leaders have been taken out in the initial strikes. Now they are reassuring people that all army commanders, top army commanders, are safe, that the president is safe, that the chief of the revolution, the supreme leader of the Iranian revolution, is safe. So Iran seems to have absorbed this initial attack today, and that's going to be bad news for the Americans and the Israelis, who have been betting on 2 things. One, that probably they're going to kill the top leadership during this attack, and 2, that maybe this attack will pave the way for those who are against the regime to take action and to try to change the regime.
Now, Mohammed, you mentioned last June and what happened when there were strikes against Iran then. Iran went into these negotiations with the United States saying that that is very much at the forefront of their mind. We heard them repeat over and over again that they are ready for peace talks, but they are also ready for war. And as such, I wonder, can you tell me, I would assume that in the making of these preparations, part of that was making sure that top administration officials and top people in the government were in specific places, or that different contingency plans were in place. Did they take the time this time to make sure that that was happening?
Well, Malin, from the results of this attack today, and from these reassurances that no top commanders or any top leaders of the country have been taken out or killed during these attacks, it's very clear that the country has been in full preparation mode for this war. They have been expecting it any minutes, and they have been trying to make sure that the scenario of June doesn't repeat itself this time around, because they know that the main guarantor of stability in the country amid this conflict, amid this war, is that the leadership remains in place and it remains on top of its duties. So that's as I said, that's bad news for the Israelis and the Americans, who have been betting on chaos from the first minute in the country. That doesn't seem to be happening, and we have instructions, steady stream of instructions from the ministries of defense, of the interior, of education, and so on, that things are in place, that preparations are in place, that the defense systems are in full action mode, that the country is safe, that people can now, the roads even, they talked about roads, saying the roads from Tehran to other areas are open for people who want more safety, and they know places where they think they will be more safe or safer, that they are free to go. So that gives reassurances to the Iranians that there is that bit of total chaos hasn't materialized so far.
Mohammed, thank you. Let's go to Noor O'Day now, who joins us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Noor, explosions have been reported across Israel. What can you tell us about what's happening there?
Well, just now we can hear sirens going off in the illegal Israeli settlement. Behind me, warnings had been sounded across the central area of Israel and in the occupied West Bank. And it is said that missiles are coming in the direction of Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem, as well as the central area of Israel. So more missiles are on the way. Shrapnel has fallen across the occupied West Bank. This is the area where most interceptions take place. Residents in the Hebron area and others have reported and even published video of the large pieces of the missiles that were shot down over the sky. So far, we haven't seen any reports of injuries or deaths, but a 9-story building in northern Israel is reported to have been struck. The state of emergency, of course, continues in Israel. Security consultations are going on round the clock, and the Israeli government is very careful to tell citizens when they can leave areas close to shelters and safe rooms. And so far, this entire morning, people have been either hunkered down in their shelters or right next to them. There are no public activities, no schools, no public gatherings allowed, and people are advised to continue monitoring the home command front instructions until further notice.
Will this have come as a surprise, Noor, to people in Israel that these strikes were coming? What has the message been like inside the country while the U.S. and Iran have been holding these nuclear negotiations?
Well, look, I can tell you that over the past month at least, the Israeli, can you hear? I don't know if you can hear that, but there's one, we just heard one explosion, probably an interception in the distance behind me. In Israel, all of the discussions had been about when, not if, a strike on Iran would take place. The idea of toppling the government in Iran is a point of consensus in Israel. And the Israeli prime minister, who's been an ardent advocate of that for decades, is capitalizing on that, capitalizing on the possible domestic benefits that going to war with Iran, possibly declaring a victory over Iran once again, would bring him come elections, which are expected in a few months, or scheduled rather in a few months. So there was that expectation. The pundits on the airwaves and the pundits on the radio were all talking about those scenarios and what people can expect. And that is why there isn't a lot of surprise at the moment and a very little chance for voicing opposition so early on.
All right, Noor O'Day, live for us in Ramallah. Noor, thank you. Qatar's foreign ministry has released a statement. It says the state of Qatar expresses its strongest condemnation of the targeting of Qatari territories with Iranian ballistic missiles, considering it a flagrant violation of its national sovereignty, a direct assault on its security and the safety of its lands, and an unacceptable escalation that threatens the security and stability of the region. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms that the state of Qatar reserves its full right to respond to this targeting in accordance with the provisions of international law and in proportion to the nature of the aggression, in defense of its sovereignty and to safeguard its security and national interests. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasizes that the state of Qatar has been and remains among the first to call for dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran and has advocated for continuing on this principle as the optimal foundation for addressing differences and resolving disputes through peaceful means, thereby sparing the region of the risk of escalation. Let's take you now to Axel Zaimovich, who joins us now from here in Doha. So, Axel, Iran had already said that it was ready and able to strike U.S. bases and assets in the region, of which there are many. Bring us up to date with what you've been seeing where you are along the waterfront in Doha.
Well, right now the situation seems to be really calm, but some 15 to 20 minutes ago we heard a massive bang here at the sky. We can actually see that one of the rockets were intercepted, and it really goes to show that this is not over. But what we understand that the Qatar's air defense is still full swing in a coordinated attack to repel any potential threat and any missile that coming towards Qatar. But also we have official statements confirming that the attacks are taking place and they have been successfully taken down. But also what we understand, there are no casualties and there's no damage to residential areas. And the public is being urged that to stay away from the public area, do not touch any debris if they find it. And if they do find something, to immediately inform the authorities here in Doha. And it really goes to show that there might be some debris falling here, but we also have seen a lot of videos circulating on social media. So one particular neighborhood here in Doha, there's been a large plume of smoke coming from that area, but we don't know any more details about that particular attack. So that's why we are still confirming to see whether it's a debris or is there any potential rocket that might be hitting some of these areas across Doha. And it really goes to show, Riley, to explain that the whole situation is taking a toll on civilians in the country in a way that all the flights have been suspended. And we also have a confirmation from Qatar Airways. They officially say that all flights have been suspended for the time being, and the airline has confirmed that the operations will be stopped due to the complete closure of the Qatari airspace. And they said they are working closely with the government and also deploying additional staff to the Hamad International Airport to help those passengers stranded in Doha. And it's really important to mention again, as the officials here have been saying, they've been advising and urging people not to go out and to follow official channels of communication and just to follow these words coming from the government, because they also want to stop spreading any potential fake news, especially spreading on social media and unverified channels.
But Axel, I also want to ask you, because it's not just Qatar that has closed its airspace. It's not just Qatar where explosions have been reported. It is happening across the wider Gulf region. What can you tell us about what we've been seeing elsewhere?
Well, that's true. A similar situation like we see here in Doha, then it seems to be that this disruption is going to affect hundreds of thousands of people who have planned their holidays, who have planned to go back to their home, because this region is an international hub for so many passengers coming here. So that's why all the instructions coming from airlines should be followed from official channels, and they will advise passengers stranded at the respective airports what to do next.
Axel Zaimovich, live for us in Doha. Thanks, Axel.
I don't know, Riley.
President Donald Trump said the United States will never let Iran have a nuclear weapon. He said Washington will also destroy Tehran's missile program.
Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated.
Our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, joins us now live from Washington. Alan, the American people will be waking up right about now to news that they are at war, and with only so far that social media from the president to understand why. Will they be on board with the idea that Iran was an imminent threat to the U.S. and this had to happen now?
Well, there are certainly those who believe that Iran had to be dealt with, and they support Donald Trump in what he's doing. But of course, a lot of his base will be deeply concerned about what has happened here. Donald Trump campaigned in 2016 against the idea of the forever wars. A country that had gone through Afghanistan and Iraq was tired of fighting abroad, and he managed to tap into something in the American people that said, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to get involved in those sort of wars. And he was very critical of what he described as the neocons who are willing to start wars and send other people's children to fight them. And of course, in 2024, during the election campaign, he said, if you vote for Kamala Harris, what you will get is World War III and a conflagration in the Middle East. And so a lot of people will point to that and say, well, you campaigned on the idea, in your words, of no stupid foreign wars. How does this fit in? Now, it's clear that the preparation for this has been going on for some considerable time, that the Israelis and the United States are coordinating on targets, that the Israelis seem to be targeting more at the head of the government there, the regime, and Donald Trump is targeting, as you heard from his social media post, more the missile sites across the country. He also said that this is going to take several days to carry out. There is support, obviously, from those close to him, like Lindsey Graham, but there are many asking questions. Why didn't he mention this in the State of the Union? You can maybe understand why, but why has he not sought approval from Congress to launch any action at all against Iran?
And so perhaps today he will have to contend with Congress, but it's not just Democrats that will be upset with it. As you touched on there is a large base in the U.S. Republican Party right now that is completely anti-interventionist, no matter where it is. Is the president going to be likely to listen to those voices, or is it too late now?
Well, it's too late. The war's underway. And of course, what we've seen is that Donald Trump for so long said, look, we're not going to get involved in nation building. We're not going to get involved in regime change. It's been echoed by other members of administration. In fact, it was only early in January that J.D. Vance, the vice president, said, we're looking to stop Iran getting a nuclear weapon. We're not interested in regime change. But he's aware that there's been pressure from the Israelis, who for 20 years have been saying that Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear bomb. But also, he's under pressure from his own allies in the region who said, look, if you go for regime change, what happens the day after? And the day after that, there is concern that there is no succession plan. There is no group that would obviously take power. And that throws the whole region into uncertainty. In the meantime, what we're seeing is exactly what Iran said, that there is the possibility of this expanding into a regional war if there was the potential for a United States-Israeli attack. And what we've seen over the last couple of hours is exactly that, attacks on American interests, American air bases, American military installations around the Middle East, as promised by the government in Tehran.
Alan Fisher live in Washington. Thank you, Alan. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made an address saying the attack on Iran has been launched to remove, quote, an existential threat. He added a call for the Iranian people to take their fate into their own hands.
Israel and the United States launched a joint campaign, Operation Lion's Roar. The objective of the operation is to put an end to the threat from the Ayatollah regime in Iran. At this time, the IDF is attacking targets of the oppressive regime, facilities of the Revolutionary Guard, along with the United States military, targeting ballistic missile sites that threaten both Israel and U.S. forces. This operation will continue as long as necessary. In recent months, the tyrants in Iran have been plotting to rebuild their nuclear and missile capabilities and to bury them underground, where we won't be able to strike them. If we don't stop them now, they will become invulnerable. To that end, the representatives in negotiations are trying to buy time, attempting to buy time in fruitless and deceitful negotiations with our American friends. Whoever lays down their weapons, including among the regime forces, will ensure their safety and secure their future. The Iranian people in all their diversity, Persians, Kurds, Azeris, Baluch, Abkhazians, and all other citizens of this wonderful nation, this is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your destiny into your own hands.
Let's go back to Noor O'Day now, who's joining us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So, Noor, both the Israeli Prime Minister and the American President making the case that these strikes are because, one, Iran is an existential threat, but also, two, that this is them helping the Iranian people. How will this address by Benjamin Netanyahu land with the Israeli people? Will they be happy about the fact that this is also partly regime change, and are they willing to bear the brunt of that?
Well, Israeli military doctrine has always been to maintain military superiority in the region, and it has always considered Iran to be a top enemy of the state of Israel. This doctrine has, even hardened even more since 2023, and Israel is seeking to be the hegemon in the region, not just to have military superiority. There is no difference in opinion, one that really makes a difference in any case in Israel regarding Iran. And we even heard from the opposition leader in Israel, Yair Lapid, a few days ago, saying if there are strikes on Iran, if there is a confrontation with Iran, there would be no government and opposition. Israel would be united behind the armed forces. They would support them while they undertake that task on behalf of Israel. Now, all of this, of course, aligns with statements that we're hearing being reported by Israeli media, quoting senior Israeli officials saying that Israel right now is targeting present, past and future leaders of the Iranian regime, as they describe it. There are even estimates that some of those top leaders have been targeted, and they're awaiting confirmation whether the assassinations went through. There is no confirmation, of course, but again, that's the atmosphere, one where Israel has brought in the United States to finally take over the government or topple the government in Tehran, and it's a point that Netanyahu will capitalize on.
Noor, thank you. We're joined now in the studio by Ali Hashim, who has been covering Iran extensively, and especially during this year. Ali, the flip side of that question, I guess, how is this going to land in Iran, this idea from both the American president and the Israeli prime minister that this is us coming to help you?
Well, the fact that this is landing as a war. We just received reports now from Minab in Iran, where 24 students were killed in an attack on a primary school. So it's clear that bombs are falling also on the heads of Iranian people and destroying cities and areas in the country. So it's not only limited to military targets, it's not only limited to establishment or security targets. So even those who might be anticipating an intervention that could help to topple the establishment or the system in Iran are going to be probably victims of this war.
And is there appetite for that in Iran right now? The American president spoke extensively at the beginning of the year when the protests were going on, saying help is on the way, we're going to help you. We know that that didn't materialize in the way that maybe some people had expected. Is it too late for people, or is there still a subsect of people in Iran that have been waiting for this moment?
No, I mean, the issue right now is that there is a war. So this is the main issue, regardless of what are the objectives or what are what's the mandate President Trump is claiming in Iran. But the fact is that this war right now is changing the whole Middle East. And actually we are seeing that the first retaliation from Iran was, aside from hitting Israel, was also launching missiles towards around 5 or 6 countries in the region. So this is just getting out of Iran and spilling over quickly without even any kind of intervals. It's becoming very intertwined with the region, and we don't know how the region actually is going to retaliate or how it's going to react to the Iranian launches. So we are in a situation where we are just watching and we are trying to grasp how things are unraveling.
And it's certainly different to how it was unraveling last June when it seemed to be a bit of a shootout between Israel and Iran. And now it seems that Iran maybe took the take that perhaps, no, we're just going to get everybody involved right away and then see where this goes.
Well, the Iranians said this, that they were warning. They were negotiating with the Americans and warning at the same time that any attack is going to be faced with a similar, what we are witnessing right now, a similar retaliation to the one we are witnessing right now. So there are no more red lines are gone. Besides, we are still also waiting to see whether allies of Iran in the region, because in Iraq, we just heard from Kataib Hezbollah that they are preparing to get into the battle.
Right.
The Houthis also are there. We don't know what's going to be Hezbollah's position in Lebanon. But the fact is that Iran is activating all its arms, it's activating all its powers, and it's multi-layered elements, whereas it's trying to make the price very high, not only on Israel or on the United States, but also on the allies of the United States.
Ali Hashem, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Now, the attacks on Iran come after weeks of U.S. military buildup in the region. The world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, has been deployed. It left its naval base in Crete on Thursday. The Ford's 2 nuclear reactor powers advanced aircraft launch systems, allowing it to operate up to 220 missions per day. It joins the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln. That carrier operates up to 70 aircraft, including FA-18 fighter jets and surveillance planes. Its nuclear propulsion system also allows for long-term deployment. Now, they are being escorted by guided missile cruisers and destroyers, giving them air defense strike and anti-submarine capabilities. Andreas Krieg is an associate professor at the School of Security Studies in King's College in London, and he joins us now live from London. One thing that is missing here, Andreas, if the U.S. is preparing for a prolonged military conflict in this region, is there are no ground troops to be seen so far. How does that play into how this is going to unfold?
This is the ultimate weakness and vulnerability of this entire U.S. strategy. If indeed we are going down a path of regime change, as Trump suggests in his speech this morning, then there is this key element missing. So the Israelis think that they can mobilize a very alienated, aggrieved Iranian population to take action against their own regime. I don't see any way that can actually happen because there isn't a coherent, consolidated opposition. There aren't any arms or weapons that are being distributed at a large scale. So basically, this is a remote standoff, air power-led campaign that can maybe lead to degradation, but actually without seizing ground and holding it, there is no way the regime is just going to collapse and disappear. And so this is kind of where the Americans will run out of steam once target lists have been exhausted, which can likely come in a few days.
And there is something difficult about an operation that is solely focused on regime change also. There is a lot of moving parts here now, as you mentioned there and alluded to, that inside Iran, the U.S. and Israel have no control over. So how do you ensure that those go according to plan now?
All the courses of action that have been presented to the president, to Trump over the last couple of weeks were imperfect, suboptimal. The reason that we had nearly a month of hesitation of striking or not striking had to do with the fact that the Joint Chiefs of Staff made it quite clear to the U.S. president that there isn't an easy way in, easy way out, and at the same time feasible, successful, and sustainable course of action on the table. And that's kind of part of the problem. What is the strategy of this campaign? And if the strategy is regime change, how can it actually be implemented? I mean, if we look at the different targets that have been struck now, it seems that the Americans focusing mainly on missile and missile production, which is one of the issues that are not on the negotiation table. So should there be any off-ramp in the coming weeks to return to the negotiation table, the Americans could then say, we can negotiate a nuclear deal because we've destroyed the ballistic missile program. But the Israelis at the same time are pushing a very much wider campaign, which I think is completely fantasy land, of saying we're trying to change the regime. We call all the Iranians to step up and take action and replace this regime. That's unlikely going to happen. And so this is, in many ways, a very, very flawed war based on flawed assumptions and a flawed strategy.
But if one of the goals, as you say, is to potentially force Iran back to the table on a number of other issues, how likely could that possibly be now, given that this is now the second time that Iran has been negotiating with the U.S. and in the middle of those negotiations has been hit with strikes?
It's very, very low, the probability right now. There's no way that Iran is just going to come around. And I think the president has to understand this. And it must have been made clear by the Omani foreign minister visiting Washington yesterday. The Qataris have been obviously in constant close conversation with the Americans, made it very clear there is no way that once you escalate, you can just turn the key as you did in June last year, to just create an off-ramp diplomatically. And so it must be very clear to the president that the Iranians are not just going to return without actually getting something significant, immediate. And I think the regime now has already preparing for the last, since probably beginning of the year, preparing and dug in for a protracted conflict. And ultimately time, I think, plays on the side of the regime. While it will be very difficult for the U.S. to sustain this campaign for weeks and weeks on end, considering that they only have 2 carrier strike groups and then basically have to use Israel as the forward operating base, because the airspaces and air bases in the Gulf are basically off limits for the U.S. Air Force. So it's not an easy campaign to endure and sustain.
In your estimation, how would Iran have been using that time, as you mentioned, if they have been looking at this since the beginning of the year and thinking that these strikes were imminent? What do you do with that time?
So the Iranian regime is not a hierarchical regime where decapitation is even on the table. So if you were to kill the supreme leader or even the line of succession, which is, I think, what the Israelis are trying at the moment, trying to take out operational and strategic commanders across the IRGC, theocratic leaders, political leaders, it doesn't mean that the regime is just going to collapse in. The fact is that what we've seen since January is that we have a complete decentralization of the chain of command and control. And so we see that despite this heavy attack this morning, there is no paralysis in Iran. Iran is sustaining it. They were very quick to actually fight back, to strike back across the Gulf, escalating, and the operational tempo is there. And that shows also that C2, command and control, has been completely delegated to the local level. And we also see that the Basij, for example, which is the major component of the IRGC that controls the public on the ground, basically they have been on alert for quite some time, and they organize themselves on the local level without having to rely constantly onto the major chain of command in Tehran. And so that, again, we have to think about the Iranian regime as an organization, a system that looks a lot more like an insurgency group, and thereby being able to sustain pressure than it looks like a normal hierarchical state.
Andreas Krieg, we appreciate you joining us from London on this breaking news. Iran's Supreme National Security Council has just issued a statement. It reads, according to the information obtained from these 2 corrupt regimes, their operations will continue in Tehran and some other cities. The government has already prepared all the needs of society, and there is no concern about the supply of public necessities. Schools and universities will be closed until further notice. Banks will continue to serve the dear nation of Iran. Government offices will operate at 50% capacity for the time being. Hassan Ahmadian is an associate professor at the University of Tehran, and he joins us now live from the Iranian capital. Thank you for being with us. Is de-escalation an option now for Iran?
Well, everything is about escalation at this point. Of course, de-escalation would be at the table moving forward, but I think with the country falling yet again subject to aggression, the country will retaliate, and it has been retaliating, and I think the retaliation has been unprecedented. The intention for that is to basically push back against the United States and its calculations that Iran's readiness and capabilities to retaliate are limited. The Iranians are showing in their retaliation, which is geographically very much spread around the region, and in many cases in Israel and in the bases, they're showing that it is very precise. They're trying to show that this can be very costly to the United States, hoping that this will create the balance that then will lead to de-escalation.
I mean, it could be very costly for the United States, but it could also be very costly to Iran, especially because Iran says that it will continue operations relentlessly until the enemy is decisively defeated. Does Iran have the stockpiles and the willpower of the people to do that?
You're right in that Iran will endure costs maybe more than what the United States will and what Israel will. But options are limited. Iran is subject to aggression, so it has to retaliate. Otherwise, you will see another Gaza unfold in Iran if Iran doesn't have the might. So it has to retaliate, though enduring much more pain maybe moving forward. But I think the Iranians are trying to showcase that it's not going to be June all over again. It's going to be a different scene in which the Iranian retaliation is wider, bigger, mightier, and that the United States, that was not dealt with decisively back in June when it attacked in the midnight hammer Iran's nuclear facilities. This time around, the Iranians will hit it hard where it hurts. Now, of course, sustainability is a matter, but I think because the bases and what the Iranians are using around their country are basically not far away from Iran borders, I think the Iranians have immense ammunition. As I said earlier, that the Israeli and American assessments is that the Iranians have like 3,000 long-range missiles that can hit Israel. But medium-range missiles that can hit U.S. bases around the country are in the tens of thousands. So it can sustain very much for a lengthy period a conflict with the United States. We don't know to what extent the United States can sustain a campaign based on 2 aircraft carriers and bases that are being hit around the clock moving forward.
Right. But I suppose my other question to you would be, has Iran made calculations for a wider or a longer conflict given the economic situation that's happening in the country? Have the Iranian people been able to make calculations for that?
Yeah, I think the previous war has taught the Iranians a lot in terms of managing their economy.